All right, man, another fight week, but it's been a while this time. So tell us how you're feeling and how everything's been going the last couple of years. And
Good. Just trying to get back into the rhythm of what it's like to be during a fight week. Uh, I'm sure nerves are going to kick in eventually at some point. Waiting for that, and just a lot of other distractions, leading up to it will help.
sure, I mean, you've never had a layoff like this. Even after your accident, you didn't have a layoff that was this long. Tell us a little bit about what you did in the interim, in between fighting, to kind of be able to stoke the competitive fires, I guess.
Well, I got really, really fat. uh, I kept to, several things, you know what I mean? One, my family, obviously, I want them all to live as martial artists. And my daughter, Isabella, really has picked up the gauntlet, and she's going to run with it, much to my dismay. She's very focused on wanting to be a martial artist now, and she's wrestling, doing jiu-jitsu and boxing with Angelo and Anna and Drysdale, so that helps. That was a factor of like, well, I guess I can't just let myself go. And then Richard Hunter and I started the Phone Booth Fighting, the podcast, which kept me talking, because then twice a week we're discussing things. So I kind of stepped into the journalistic aspect of MMA and had to stay focused. Whereas before, if you'd have said, "Hey, what'd you think about what happened to Connor?" If you'd have asked me that before the podcast, I'd been like, "What did he do?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's the biggest news. I'm like, dude, I don't do that shit. And so, that's helped me stay a little bit more in the loop. And then, obviously, I think the one thing that really helped me a lot was ACB came along, and it was a blessing as far as doing commentary, as far as, it was a way of paying the bills. But sitting outside the cage and analyzing fighters every day, all the time, that was a huge thing, It was definitely something that kept me interested, There was really a moment, I forgot what country, I think I was in Tajikistan. And I went to the weigh-ins, and I was sitting there, and someone was talking about a move that happened the previous week at a fight. And so I'm sitting there on the mats, and we're rolling things out. We're sitting there, and one of the guys go, "I thought you retired. Like, you don't seem like you want to retire." I'm all, "No, I don't, huh?" And there was kind of a moment where I realized that I really do love this still, and talking martial arts and being a part of martial arts. So I guess the fire was always there. I just, there was a lot of things that kind of hurt, I'm very happy, because the things that I was so happy about the UFC with is what I found in Bellator. I'm not a savvy businessman in that sense. I'm not cutthroat. Much to my wife's disapproval. I'm a family kind of oriented kind of guy, and even my business friendships are based upon we're friends. We don't need contracts. We shake hands, and the UFC was originally very much up that line. And then, with the sale and stuff, and then, most of my friends were leaving. Joe Silva left. The Fertittas obviously are gone. I have just a couple friends that still work there. Everybody else, I'd find out, like, oh, no, they let so-and-so go, or I get a call, "Hey, man, I'm not going to be with the company anymore." And so, coming over to Bellator, I talked to Roy about it, like, "Hey, I've always heard good things about Scott. Like, what's he really like?" And they're like, "Everything you heard's true, man. The guy's he's a fighter's promoter, and so coming over here has been an awesome experience. My wife, is able to call people up like, "Hey, this is what's going on." No problem. I mean, I dealt with some, injuries, as any guy going into his 40s is going to probably deal with. I called them up the next day. They had me at different, doctor's appointments. "Okay, well, what do we got to do to keep you, firing all cylinders?" Running around with CJ, the 2 weeks before the fight, coming out here, the promoter, that wasn't, come on, dude, who wants to take a red eye, get 2 hours of sleep, and then do media for 12 hours? And, and CJ, they understand that. They're like, "Hey, we know that, just like I do, I understand that that's part of the game." They don't sit there and look at me like, "Well, we're paying you, do it," It's like, well, no, hey, what do you need? Do you need coffee? When would you like to take a break to go eat? And those type of concerns with the company being smaller has made me very happy.
You mentioned nerves. Is it nerves about coming back after such a long layoff? Is it nerves fighting for a new promotion for the first time in front of some new fans? Is it nerves because of the opponent? Or is it a mix of everything?
You know what?
Or maybe, like you said, maybe they haven't even kicked in yet.
Well, here's the thing. This is the thing that all fighters my age, are going to have to deal with, is one bad performance. I can go and smash Fedor. I can go smash Chael, you know, and look like the best version of I've ever presented. And let's say I go fight and it's Mitrione in the finals, or Bader, whoever, King Mo, and I go out there and have a bad performance. The very next conversation when I walk out of that cage will be, so you're going to retire? Are you done, right? That's it. So, you know, hell, I think we were talking about retirement when I was 28, you know? Like, I can't imagine now being 38 what they're going to say. So that's the part that has been apprehensive, is going up to is like, man, you know, another fighter can have an off night. If you're an older, mature fighter and you have an off night, you're, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the fat lady's standing up, getting ready to, you know, belt one out for you, and everybody's, you know, oh, you should retire. And it's not that you care what the fans think, but it's kind of like, I always tell people like this: being a professional fighter is like having a broken arm. You know, you break your arm, you go to work. Every time you meet somebody, you're gonna have to explain how your dumbass broke your arm. You have to relive the story, explain it again, tell everybody, and it's gonna get shorter. Sometimes it'll get longer. Depends on who you're telling. But after 8 weeks, it gets old, you know what I mean? Like, yes, no, I was not drinking, no, it was an accident, yes, I'm aware that I shouldn't have been doing that. You know what I mean? Like, you know, now imagine doing that for, you know, 17 years.
It could be a little bit better for you, though, given that you're a heavyweight, and everybody seems to know in this sport that heavyweights seem to go longer than, than the lighter guys, so maybe will that ease some of the conversation? No. It'll still be there?
It'll still be there. And, you know, and I accept it, you know what I mean? I know it's there, but I think that's what I'm most nervous about. You know, look, I'm a better fighter than Fedor. I know what I'm capable of. Fedor can't beat me in striking. He can't beat me in a wrestling match. Hell, you put a gi top on me and I'll beat him in a sambo match. I'm going to take his arm off. There's just nothing he can do. There's nowhere in the cage you can go and hide and find out. The only element that he has going in his favor is possibly an overhand right that lands. But hell, every heavyweight with a heartbeat has that going for him, you know. I'm nervous about performing at what I'm capable of. I've seen what I've done, you know, in sparring and grappling and wrestling in the gym. I want everybody to see what I know I can do, you know.
This is a unique situation, this tournament, because you mentioned earlier about the guys like you and Roy who have come over from the UFC, and this tournament's made up of 6 guys, I believe, that were in the UFC in the past several years. Can you talk a little bit about that, and does that make a difference to you that you're going to be fighting potentially guys who you could have fought over there too?
No, I mean, right now, I mean, Bellator is, I mean, obviously, look, you know, it's not no elephant in the room. UFC is still #1. But Bellator is making a real strong move towards #2, you know, solidifying that. So, you know, we're jumping that direction, and, you know, and I think that Scott has a good idea, you know, I'm not going to hide behind the fact that, you know, I have more fights behind me than I have ahead of me. You know, Mitrione's probably more in the middle of his career, but I mean, I was trying to break that down. Like, everybody goes, oh, you know, you're an older fighter. I'm like, shit, I'm the 3rd youngest guy in the tournament, you know. But you know, Scott, I think, has a good game plan with, you know, right now, guys like an Aaron Pico. We all know he's going to be a superstar. And there is some hype around him, but still, if you sit there and go, okay, main event, we got Aaron Pico fighting, and the people that you're going to put him against, it's not going to do too well right now, you know. But if you sit there and go, well, we got Chael Sonnen and you know, Quentin Jackson fighting, everybody go, oh, I know who those guys are, you know. But you have to also educate the fans and like, okay, they're the sport, and they're established commodities and stars. But we're not going to be here 5-10 years from now, you know. Well, shit, I might be. My kids' private school's expensive. But you know, for the most part, the rest of us, you know, are on the way out. You know, we're on the downhill. You know, as far as fights. You know, I've fought almost 30 times in the UFC. I doubt I'm going to fight 30 times in Bellator. You know, shit, I don't know. My wife might make me. I'm going to hurt just thinking about this.
Let's talk about this Fedor fight, because this is a fight that the fans have asked for years, a dozen years, right? Have you been thinking about a fight with him for that long, or even longer?
Look, man, I'm a fighter. I'm competitive. I've thought about boxing against Anthony Joshua. Now, the logistics of it, know that it's probably suicidal, you know. I'd try to last around, you know. But you still, as a fighter, I can't help. Probably what other guys do all the time, too. They sit, they watch us fight, they go, I wonder how I would do against him. So I'm no different than you guys, except for I actually will be able to do something, you know what I mean? Like, I don't just drink beer and hang out at the bar and talk shit, you know? I am actually know my way around a gym, and I could take your arm off. And so, you know, seeing Fedor is that, you know, watching him fight and looking at him going, oh, you know, and then we've had common opponents, you know, Andrei Arlovsky, Tim Sylvia. Remember when he fought Tim? I was there live watching. And, you know, of course, I've always wanted to match up against him. And I feel like I match up well against him. You know, Fedor's not a big guy, you know. He's quick and he's fast, but that's why I made sure I came in shape, because when I'm in shape, I'm just as quick as he is. If you go back and watch the Mirko Cro Cop fight, you can see how quickly I can cover distance. You know, my explosiveness has never been questioned. I think people have questioned my conditioning before they've questioned my athleticism. And so, you know, I think that, you know, when I see him move on the ground, you know, submissions and stuff, I think it's an interesting fight. I've wanted to put myself out there and dance with him for a long time.
You've done so much analyst work and break down where he stands then amongst the best heavyweights of all time. You know you're in the conversation. Is he right there with you in that conversation?
Yeah, he is. You know what? Our sport is getting so advanced that it's details that change things. For example, if you want to talk about Wanderlei Silva being one of the top 205ers, I would say, are we talking pride rules, or are we talking American rules, or, you know, international? Because stomping to the head would make a difference in his style of fighting, you know. When you talk about Fedor and you say he's one of the best heavyweights in the world, I'm like, well, what are we talking about? Are we talking inside of a cage, or are we talking inside of a boxing ring, you know? It makes a difference. You know, just as much as, you know, clay versus grass, if you play tennis, it makes a difference. And I know people sometimes, you know, they're like, well, fighting's fighting. I'm like, it's not that, you know, black and white. There's so many details that matter. So as far as in a boxing ring, pride rules, yeah, Fedor is Hall of Fame, one of the top 5 heavyweights of all time. In a cage, he's small. He doesn't have good cage technique. I don't know if I could put him in the top 5.
You go out there and you beat him on Saturday night. Will you think of him differently? Will you say, "Hey, man, I still beat one of the best to ever do it"?
Oh yeah, but I mean, no, in the open of the cage, his hand speed, his athleticism is still dangerous. You know, he's very herky-jerky. You know, he bounces a lot for a heavyweight. Most heavyweights, I mean, besides Matt Mitrione, who's just a freak of nature, don't bounce like that. And then to have that kind of bouncy movement and hand speed, and at the same time actually be able to grapple. Again, we can't exclude Mitrione. He can't grapple for shit. You know, is a rare case. A guy that, you know, when you finally catch him, you might not want to catch him. You know what I mean? He could take you. You know, his submissions are quick. He has a good pivot on his back for the armbar. You know, obviously he can't stuff a triangle. He has short little fat legs. You know, and his get up is, you know what I mean? He doesn't use the cage properly, you know, but those are things that he hasn't done in the past. Maybe he's smart like I'm smart, and he's seen that, well, the cage is different than the boxing ring. I need to make some adjustments, and he's probably brought some people in.
Have you thought at all about, let's call it legacy, and what your legacy grows to if you win this tournament and become a Bellator heavyweight champion? You'll have a UFC title, you'll have a Bellator title. Do you think at all about things like that, or are you still just you know, this is the fight that I have to win to even get into that conversation, so I'm only thinking about Fedor?
I do think about it. I mean, I think more about legacy now. I never cared about it for years. I mean, when I first won the UFC belt, it fucking sat in a closet. You know, my wife was finally the one that put it up on the wall and was like, hey, you know, we should probably put this out. People think it'd be cool. And to this day, people still come to my house. They're like, is that really just sitting there like that? I'm like, yeah. Grab it, take a picture, dude, whatever you want to do. It's just a shiny piece of metal, you know. I still had to beat a human being for it, and that's what I focus on. It's like, well, that was a particular match, and that's why, I mean, right now, if Fedor, for example, just you got cold feet or an injury happened, or, you know, the whole shit with Syria and Russia, they didn't allow, his visa got blocked and he couldn't come over, which I got to be honest with you, I was nervous about. I haven't paid attention. Were you a little nervous? A little Russian tensions? I was nervous. I was like, oh man, there goes my payday. But if they put a different guy in there, they could grab a guy that we all know that wouldn't last 5 seconds. I'm still going to be nervous. It's still a performance part of going out there and competing. And, there's just no way to eliminate that. And that's really what I focus on. And as far as legacy, it matters to my children. I see them now like, look, I haven't watched the countdown shows. I've never seen a countdown show. You know that? I can't watch it. I can't even hear my own voice. I've never watched myself commentate. I can't hear myself talk. I've never listened to my own podcast. It bugs me. I don't know why. It just, like when I see someone, like my kids will put a video game on, and if I come in and their video game and I'm on it, I get like this kick to my stomach. I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing, and I have to evade. I have to leave. So I don't think it's going to matter much to me, but it matters to them. I could see that, the other day I was going through, sorry, Cage, I was going through his iPad, making sure what he was looking at, going through his search history, being a father.
Being a good dad.
Yeah, and I could see that he was watching all my highlights and watching fights, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, that's crazy. I mean, I wonder what that feels like for him. So me out there performing, me going out there and becoming the Bellator champion, I'm really doing it for my children, you know what I mean? I like to fight, and I've accomplished what I've wanted to accomplish. Now at this point, it's for them, and they go back. I look at it and go, hey, the belts, different things now I keep. I put different medals I had from high school. I put to the side now because it's for my children. It's for them. To be proud of. And I understand that. You know what I mean? Like wanting to be proud of your father and your mother.
I'm sure they'll be proud of you Saturday. It's good to see you back after a couple of years, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.